Hello, this is Tony Gentry speaking to you from Richmond, Virginia in the USA on the other side of the world. I am here to speak with you today about mobile technologies for cognition and function, specifically for young people with autism. And I want to thank everyone who helped set up this program, set up this chat today, and for the opportunity to reach out to you. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Occupational Therapy at Virginia Commonwealth University. And my career my research career has ranged over the last 20 years across a number of developmental, intellectual, and other cognitive behavioral disability populations, working to leverage consumer technologies, mobile technologies, and smart home technologies, for instance, to support people with cognitive behavioral challenges in performing activities of their daily lives more independently and more safely. At the end of the lecture, there's a slide that shows some of the research articles and practice articles that I've written you may wish to access, since we only have a few minutes to talk this morning about a very complex subject that requires considerable consideration to implement. What I'm here to talk about today are devices that you and I may be carrying around in our pockets, smartphones. Those who don't use a smartphone but who want to use the strategies and tools that I am going to be talking about now, especially young people, may prefer an iPod Touch, a personal digital assistant, which has all of the features of a smartphone, except not the phone. And of course, iPads and other tablets, Android tablets, Microsoft tablets, also have the same features and app availability that smartphones have. Some people like tablets because they have large icons, and if you are dexterity challenged, that can be useful. They also have louder speakers than smartphones, so people who use these as augmentative communication devices may prefer a tablet. Those with visual challenges may also prefer a larger screen. Before we start, I want to talk a little bit about challenges that people with autism may face in using a mobile device to support their everyday functional independence. And this comes under the category of neurodiversity. Typically, people with autism think of themselves as neurodiverse, which means that they feel and sense things differently than people who are not considered autistic. And a lot of this happens around sensory issues. Sensory differences feed perceptual challenges and adaptations, so that the behaviors we observe in our children that seem unusual very often are about responding to sensations that are overwhelming or seeking sensations that are underwhelming. An important thing to do in working with children who are manifesting these behaviors is to consider the environment around them. What happened immediately before the behavior was manifested? Is it possible there was a trigger in the environment that caused a sensory input that was challenging? And then once we've begun to sort that out, we implement something called a sensory diet, a graduated introduction of the stimuli that are found to be difficult to manage, with some reward for tolerating change as that stimuli is introduced. And you want to work collaboratively with the student to support adaptations and inclusion in the environment and the work site that you're in, so that those behaviors can be managed. An example of that might be breakfast. Sensory concerns at breakfast that may cause a child to either not want to eat or manifest difficult behavior at mealtime might be the aromas of the food, the texture of the food, its flavor, its color. There may be sounds in the room that are difficult, or there may be even movement and light in the room that is difficult. Any of those sensory challenges may make it difficult for a child to manage eating breakfast. As a parent, you want your child to eat now, and it can be difficult to sort through why they're having problems with it. But very often it's a sensory challenge that's involved. The same thing can happen in introducing a mobile device or a computer tablet as a learning tool for students. Sensory issues for a tablet might be the smooth screen, which can be challenging for tactile reasons. The screen itself has bright and sometimes moving images that can be overwhelming visually. The alarms and other sounds on the screen can be challenging for people who have hearing sensitivity. Another thing to consider is that younger children may consider a device like this entirely a toy. They may consider it a fidget object and toss it around and play with it for that reason. What we want to do is help them understand that this device can be a tool to help them do things they want to do without having a parent or another caregiver constantly around nagging them and supervising them. So the sensory diet in any situation, whether it's an iPad or breakfast, would be to observe and keep track of the behaviors that are driving these sensory needs. Think about what happened before, what the environment was like that may have triggered that behavior. When was it? Where was it? And then keep in mind, whatever you do, punishment is not going to work. Shaming will not work. Students are responding to overwhelming stimuli. It's hurtful to them, and they're trying to manage it as well as they can. So what you want to do is find a way to reduce the sensory antecedents that might have triggered the behavior, provide opportunities to learn how to self-manage stimulation when possible, and work with the student to accommodate sensory stimuli into their everyday life in a way that they can manage. The best solutions incorporate all three strategies. When thinking about using a computer tablet, another issue to think about has to do with age ranges. So in the work that I've done across the last 20 years with young people who have autism, I've learned that many students under the age of 5 will see a mobile device or a tablet as a toy. By the age of 10, they begin to recognize that it's still a toy, but it can be used for learning and engagement, and perhaps even helping to guide them in everyday activities. After the age of 10, on into adulthood, there is a growing, emerging understanding that this device can support function and reduce their need for caregiver supervision when used in the ways I'll be discussing here. Sensory challenges to consider and to manage, and when using a tablet or a smartphone, you may need to change the brightness or the sound volume settings, take away distracting apps or lock them out using the accessibility settings feature. Some students prefer a keyboard because they like the tactile feedback of a keyboard. You may want to add a fidget aid of some kind to hold in their hand when they're using the device so they don't use the device as a fidget aid. It's nice to consider ergonomic positioning when using the tablet, having the student be able to sit upright at a table with a tablet stand and a shock-proof case. Managing distractions in the environment can help. Also having a learning goal in mind whenever using the tablet, so that the student begins to understand that this is not just a toy, but a tool to help them learn and behave in the environment. It's also important to reward productive use of the tablet, providing some kind of thank you for successfully achieving the goal they pursued. One thing to keep in mind, and that I want to chat with you about today, is that we are overwhelmed by applications that can be downloaded to these devices. There are millions of them on the market. I included with the packet that I sent to your team a handout that shows about 30 apps that I've used a lot with young people with autism in my practice. And I recommend you try those out so you don't become overwhelmed by the many apps on the market. Start there, see what you like about those, use them as we'll be discussing, and I think you'll find that it's much easier to navigate this overwhelming world of apps. There's a challenge in using mobile AT that I could talk about with you for days, but in brief, as with any assistive technology, first assess the functional challenges the person you're working with is having in everyday life. What human supports are now needed in order for them to successfully perform chosen tasks? Is there a low-tech or electronic substitute that can provide that support? Seek the simplest, most straightforward solution that works. And then the other side of assistive technology, the human side, provide training and follow along in real-world situations in their everyday life to test how useful the chosen solution may be. I like to solve one problem at a time, but by the end of working with a student, typically there are no more than 4 or 5 apps added to their device to support them in cognitive behavioral challenges for everyday life. And when you're sitting down thinking about this, what I like to ask are 5 questions. I'm going to go through those 5 questions for the rest of this talk, but in summary, they are: can you make use of the mobile device? Can you contact and communicate with other people when you need to do so? What activities do people have to remind you to do? Do they have to nag you to do? What tasks require supervision in order to complete them successfully? And how are you doing? So let's look at each one of these questions and one by one and look at possible solutions to address them using a mobile device. Question 1, can you make use of a mobile device? Many people with developmental disabilities have hearing challenges, vision challenges, tactile challenges, motoric difficulties, and of course, cognitive challenges. Can the device be set up in such a way that these challenges can be overcome so they can interact with the device successfully? Fortunately, there is a robust set of accessibility settings on board smartphones. Apple devices particularly have very robust accessibility settings that allow blind people, people who are unable to speak, people who are unable to hear, people who have difficulties tapping a screen to be able to navigate and use a device just as the rest of us do. Some of those settings are VoiceOver, which speaks the screen out loud, Zoom, which magnifies the screen, Assistive Touch, which makes tapping the screen easier in different ways, predictive text, and the ability to lock out apps that might be distracting for a student. Many of us never look at those accessibility settings because we don't need them, but people with disabilities use them quite a bit, and it's important to learn how they're used and how they might help someone with disability access and make use of a device. One of the most powerful tools for people who are able to speak articulately is the voice control tools on these devices. Siri on Apple devices, Google Now on Android devices allows you to search your device by voice, send text, set reminders, control smart home features, really navigate anything that needs to be navigated on the device simply by talking to it. People who have difficulty tapping the screen but can access some other kind of switch to control their environment may use the accessibility setting called switch control and scanning. The device here is, for example, this young man is using a Bluetooth switch connected to his iPad using Bluetooth. By tapping the button, he's able to move up and down the screen, select an app, and navigate within the app. Even people who are completely locked in and unable to move anything except their eyes can navigate a tablet or a smartphone using add-on devices like this eye gaze camera. I won't show the YouTube video here, but if you go to it, you'll see how the eye gaze system works. So really anyone with any impairment should be able to navigate a device by accessing accessibility settings or some onboard, external switch. Which takes us to the second question: can you use the device to get in touch with people when you need to? Can you call for help? Can someone find you if you're lost? If someone comes upon you in a case of emergency, can they help you? Of course, smartphones are phones, so it's easy to use them. I'm also a big fan in working with people who have disabilities using the video chat capabilities on these devices, because very often when someone's in a time of difficulty, it's hard for them to explain what's going on. But if you can see on video where they are and what's happening, you can help them. I also like to set up the in case of emergency features on these devices. The iPhones have those built in. At the bottom of the front screen, there's an emergency tab. And if you tap emergency, you go to a screen that says medical ID. This allows you to type in the person's name, their contact information, their medical situation, so that in an emergency situation, a first responder can go directly past the passcode and learn that information in order to help them. Android has a similar feature called Medical ID. Samsung devices have a system like that called Safety Assistance, and there are add-on apps like the SOS One-Click app that you can add onto your phone as well. I'm a fan of person locators for people with intellectual disability. Find My Friends on Apple devices is a good version of that. Google Plus works for Android devices, and there's an add-on app called Family Locator that does the same thing. Communicating with these devices is also possible and used robustly in the autism community. You probably know that there are freestanding devices that are devoted entirely to communication by companies like Tobii, Dynavox, and GoTalk. But tablets also can have add-on apps that do just as good a job of working as augmentative communication tools, and then also have the other features that tablets have. I've just put up here on the side a list of some of the most powerful high-end augmentative communication apps with their US prices. LAMP Words for Life is used very often by speech therapists in the US in school settings, as is Proloquo to Go. Those are the most expensive of these devices. I recommend that you work with a speech therapist in your community to decide which of these apps might be most appropriate for your child if he or she is having difficulty communicating verbally. And try that out and set it up so that they can communicate and participate in the world around them as others do. There are inexpensive communication apps as well. There's a free app for Apple. If you're able to type words, you can type in whatever you like to say, and the app will speak it out loud for you when you tap the button Speak. If you're not able to spell, but you can select pictures, you can choose Let Me Talk, which is both for Apple and Android devices. You drag those pictures to the top of the screen. You end up with a stream of pictures in a row. You tap the arrow for Go, and words are read out to state an entire sentence made by those images. So that's communication using these devices. So we've talked about two questions. One, can you use the device, perhaps with accessibility setting support? And can you communicate using these devices? The third question gets into the question of memory and attention, which is a very important part of using these tools for anyone with cognitive behavioral challenges. And what I do is I sit down with a person, and I sit down with a caregiver with a piece of paper and a pen, and I ask them to go through their entire day from the morning to the night and tell me across that day, what are the situations where people need to ask you to do something, remind you to do something, or nag you to do something. Once I have that list, we go back through the list again, and I ask, which are the most important things that you need to get done during the day that people have to support you on? And then I ask, is it possible that one of these devices can provide those reminder supports so this caregiver can step away? The kinds of memory challenges I'm talking about are things like, did I take my meds? What do I do next? I need to be able to wake up at a certain time. There are chores I need to do. There's several things I need to do across my day, and I need to be able to manage distractions when that happens and switch from one task to another. So as you know, smartphones and tablets all have reminder alarms on their calendars, and there are other versions. For instance, on the Apple devices, there's an app called Clock that allows you to set reminders. Many of us set reminders on our phones for one or two things a week, perhaps, like I need to go to the dentist or I need to pick up something at the grocery store. People with autism very often use many more reminder apps across their day than we might use. For instance, on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see a typical list of reminders for one of my clients. The thing to keep in mind here, though this might be annoying to you to hear so many reminders go off across your day, I'm speaking stereotypically, but many people with autism are routine-based. They like to know what's going to happen next. They like the reassurance of knowing exactly what's going to happen. And having timed reminders go off across their day to support them in switching from one task to another can be reassuring and help them stay on task without the need of a supervisor or caregiver tapping them on the shoulder. People who have difficulty reading an app reminder when it goes off, there are apps to support them as well. BugMe allows you to put a picture in as a reminder, so that if the person can identify what's going on in the picture, they know what to do. Vocal allows you to record a verbal alert, so that when the alarm goes off, instead of having to read the screen, the alert is spoken out loud to you. For instance, it's time to go brush your teeth. I'm a fan of medication management apps as reminders because many of these both show a picture of the pill to be taken at the right time and offer an opportunity for you to check off that you've taken it. This helps prevent not just underdosing, but overdosing for people who may have forgotten that they took their pill already. You don't always need a smartphone to use reminders. There are other kinds of devices that provide reminder supports. Watchminder is a fairly inexpensive wrist-worn watch that allows you to program in up to 12 reminders a day. As you can see, one reminder is printed out on this screen. It says, "Pay attention." So we're at a place now where you're remembering to do things because the device is reminding you to do that across your day. And now we get to a place where doing those things is complex because the task itself is hard to learn. You may need support setting it up. You may need support going through the different steps of the task, pacing yourself to do it at the right speed so everything is done thoroughly. You may need support with problem solving, sticking to the task, getting it done right. These are the kinds of things that caregivers and support providers provide deep supervision in across a person's day. But actually, these devices can be set up in such a way to help people do those without necessary human supervision. On Google, on Android and Apple devices, there is a free app on each of them that allows you to set up slideshows showing people how to do complex tasks. iOS Notes and Google Keep both allow that function. You can add in a sequence of pictures, you can make a to-do list, you can draw on the screen. So imagine if you wanted someone to think through, let's say, their morning routine of getting dressed, brushing their teeth, having breakfast. You could build a slideshow in the Notes app called a morning routine that would walk them through each step of their morning routine, and they could check off by tapping the screen when they've done each element of that task. You could have a similar set of notes set up for any task across their day. And again, this is free. It's on board the device when you buy it. But there are add-on apps that allow this to be done a little bit more easily, especially from the user's perspective. I'm a fan of an app called Plan It, Do It, Check It Off, that allows you to take photographs using the device, building a slideshow showing each step of an activity, which is then built into a slideshow, added into the app. The end user simply taps the activity they want to do. For instance, on the right-hand side of the screen here, there's a series of slideshows that have been set up. Let's say you tap garbage. When you do that, the slideshow would appear, and by swiping on the screen, you'd see each step of the activity taking out the garbage. Once you've done that activity and you finish that, a check mark shows up on the screen showing that it's been done for the day. A more complex but powerful way of teaching complex tasks is using instructional videos. We all use instructional videos to learn something new. Instructional videos with people who have developmental disabilities, there's a strong, very, very robust research history in looking into using instructional videos for people with developmental disabilities. And it turns out that this is one of the most powerful assistive technologies that we can use to help people learn to sequence the elements of a task, find their way from one place to another, manage behavioral cues and interactions with others in social interactions. You would need to make these videos yourself. You want to make sure that they're short and to the point, that they use close-ups because the person will be watching them on a small screen, with good lighting, with a voiceover instruction that describes what's happening on screen. And once you've made this short video about a particular activity that you would like the student to be able to do independently, their job is to turn on the video when it's time to do it. The model that has been proven by research to be most effective is before they perform the task, they play the video all the way through, watching what needs to be done. When they're performing the task, they have the device with them, and they can play and pause the video as they go to make sure they complete all of the steps. And then once they've completed that activity, they watch the video one more time to compare what they did to what the video shows. This needs to be done multiple times a day across a number of different settings, but the research has shown that by following this model of training, people with developmental disabilities, with intellectual disabilities, can learn very well how to perform complex tasks. In fact, for people with autism, some research has shown that learning this way is more powerful than face-to-face instruction with a human instructor. An app that provides both slideshow opportunities and video opportunities is the functional planning system. Inside this app, you can record slideshows, as we talked about before, and there's a slideshow shown here on this picture with the different steps of each element of the slide for someone putting on deodorant. You can also create videos in this. What's nice about this particular app is all the videos, for instance, are kept inside the app, so the user doesn't have to navigate around their device trying to find the video when they need it. And another very powerful feature is you can connect a reminder alert to each video so that the video opens up exactly when the person needs it. For instance, the video might say it's time to catch the bus for school, and a video would open up that would show how to navigate that activity. Another similar app is CanPlan, which operates very similarly, has both the reminder alerts and a checkoff feature to show that the task has been done. Something that I've used a lot in working with people in their homes is setting up QR codes in different locations around the home. It's a little complex to set these up yourself. I've got instructions written out here on the screen. But the idea is that when the user goes to a particular site where an activity needs to be done, all they need to do is hold up their phone to the QR code, and at that point a video opens on their device that shows them exactly what to do. I've set these QR codes up at washing machines, for instance, in bathrooms where people need to do their morning routine, any location on a work site where a complex task needs to be performed. Apple devices automatically read QR codes when you show their camera to the QR code. Android devices have an app called the QR Scan app that can do the same thing. So we've now helped people remember to do things, and we've helped them learn how to perform complex tasks on their own using the supports of a device. The last of the 5 questions is, how are you doing? Can a device support your general health, sleep, manage pain, anxiety, and stress, and help you adapt to difficult social situations. Sometimes you might want to add an add-on device that communicates with your smartphone or tablet using Bluetooth. Some of these devices allow you to track activity across the day or track your sleep, and having that information can help people learn how to adapt their behaviors so that they're living a more healthy lifestyle. There are add-on apps that can be added to the device. For instance, an app called Mood Tracker for both Android and Apple devices that is free is set up in this way. It doesn't passively track you. What you do, you set up reminders, and let's say 4 times a day the device turns on and says it's time to track your mood. You go to the device and drag your finger across different elements, different questions on the device. That's recorded and saved so that over time, you've tracked exactly what you recorded about how you were feeling at that time during the day. This way, when you go to see your doctor or go to see your therapist, and they ask you, so how have you been feeling this last month? Rather than simply saying, oh, I've been okay, you can pull out the app and there'll be a graph that shows exactly how you were feeling each day that the reminder went off, maybe up to 4 times a day. That allows people to titrate your medications, titrate your therapies, and begin to think through what triggers might be causing difficult behaviors in your day. Another app that I use for lots of my students is a free app, so it's easy to add on to any device. It's simply a deep breathing app. When people feel anxious, to learn to be able to take a slow, deep breath to calm themselves can be very helpful. This is a tool that even small children can learn to use because it simply uses a balloon to show you how to breathe. Let me show you an example of how that works.
Tactical breathing is a 4-count method of breathing designed to help create a relaxation response. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold.
Many of my clients also have some kind of relaxation app on their device. Very often it's the times when people don't have a task to perform that they get into trouble, so to speak. They don't know what to do, so they wander or something like that. I teach people to use a relaxation app for 15 minutes during a downtime where they can calm themselves, listen to quiet music or sort of relaxation instructions, and it helps them manage stressful situations. The final thing I like to do is set up some kind of behavioral plan when I'm teaching people to use these devices in their everyday life as a way to build up competence and also buy-in to using them. There are apps that make that happen. The one here on the screen is called iReward. And what I like to do is sit down with the student and think about the functional goals that we want them to be able to perform on their own, that they want to perform on their own. You make a list of those on the app. You can enter up to 5 goals on the iReward app. Each time you see the student doing the thing that they've agreed they'd like to be able to do, you borrow the device for a moment and give them a star. When the entire row of stars is completed, then you provide whatever reward you've agreed on immediately, so the child is reinforced for performing that task. I'll set up the iReward app on students' phones when I'm teaching them to use reminders, when I'm teaching them to use video prompts as a way to help them begin to implement these strategies in their everyday life. So this is what we've been talking about, the basic adaptations that you might want to consider in implementing using a smartphone or a tablet are reminders, different strategies for task sequencing and behavioral management using slideshows or videos. These can also be used for wayfinding. You may want to use health tracking strategies, perhaps with an external device that tracks sleep and activity. Apps for augmentative communication are necessary for some people. And you might want to get into the accessibility settings for people who have sensory challenges. We haven't talked about other things like protecting the device using a case or belt clip, simplifying the screen for easy access. Some people need external speakers or a keyboard. And don't forget, you may want to implement a behavioral contract. One last thing I want to speak about, I can't emphasize this as much as I'd like to, but I would really like to share this with you. One mistake we make in using assistive technology is we think we know what we're doing and we hand the device to someone and we walk away. There are two sides to assistive technology. One is the device itself, and the other side, perhaps the most important side, is the therapist or caregiver who takes the time to understand what the challenges are, thinks of a way to address those challenges, chooses the device and the apps that are helpful, that they think will be helpful, train the person to use those apps in their everyday life, and then provide follow-along to make sure that that's working as they go through their day. Once you have to be able to put all of those pieces in place in order to assure that the assistive technology will work. Using a mobile device in the ways I've been discussing is just as complex as teaching someone to use a motorized wheelchair, for instance. But the rewards are great, and I've seen over and over in my research career and in my practice career that once those pieces are put in place, people really can use these devices to manage their everyday life independently. And that's a very powerful part of growing up. I recommend you try it. I recommend you consider it, but please recognize also that this is something of a trial and error procedure. You need to be patient, you need to smile, and move forward as you go. I want to just say that I've been doing this for a long time, but the way I've learned how to do this is by sharing with others. My email address is here. If you have a question you'd like to ask, I'd be happy to hear from you, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can to share what I know so that you can help the students that you work with your own children if you need to help them learn to do things more independently and more safely as they grow. Here are some of the articles that I've written about this topic that may help you as well as you begin to explore these opportunities. One last time, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today from the other side of the world. I hope you all stay well in this era of coronavirus, and I hope at some point I'll be able to come to Malaysia and meet you and work with you as we together explore the world of assistive technology for people with autism. Thank you very much. Have a good day.